In the shadowed alleys of ancient Rome, justice was a stage of horrors, and nowhere was this more vivid than in the punishment of parricide. To kill your father tore at Rome's very roots, and the city responded with a sentence as unique as it was terrifying. Poena, cullei. Imagine the suffocating darkness of a leather sack, its rough texture pressing in as the sounds of panicked animals echo around you. A dog's growl, a monkey's screech, the hiss of a snake. This was no simple execution. It was chaos personified, a muddy dance of disgrace and primal fear. Imagine us embarking on a journey back in time to ancient Rome, or Mexanichens in 19th century, where every crime was met with a punishment, infused with symbolism. The Roman justice system, driven by ancient traditions and divine mandates, offered a vivid portrayal of its cultural identity through its severe and imaginative punishments. It is within this world of gods and laws that we come across one of the most perplexing punishments: parricide. To kill one's own father was not merely a crime, but a grave sin that stripped away the very fabric of society. The punishment designed for this act was as haunting and symbolic as the crime itself. In the hearts and minds of the Romans, parricide was more than just the murder of a family member. It was an attack on the intricate web of society itself. Within Roman families, the father, or pater familias, was the keystone, bearing unmatched authority and respect. His death at the hands of his progeny shattered the natural order, laying bare the fragile foundation of Roman social life. To face retribution for such a violation, it was not enough to simply take the life of the transgressor. Instead, erasure from memory was their fate, buried beneath layers of symbolism and ceremony. The punishment, famously known as poena cullei, involved stitching the condemned into a leather sack with an assortment of beasts: a dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a snake, each chosen for its unique symbolic resonance. The image of the monkey within this sack offered a grotesque parallel to man, transforming human sin into a twisted mimicry of nature. Meanwhile, the snake, clever and silent, slid alongside, an embodiment of treachery blatantly mirroring the deceit inherent in parricide. The dog, which once represented loyalty and protection, howled a savage harmony with the chaos within the sack. And then there was the rooster, a relentless marker of time and the eternal guardian at the threshold of life and death, pecking sharply into the grim theatre of punishment. As profound and dreadful as each animal's presence was, the elaborate tapestry of symbolism found completion in the final act of disposal. The criminal, now cocooned within leather, was denied dignity or resolution. Cast into a river, their fate was sealed as the water carried them into oblivion. Far from a simple execution, this watery end signified purification and erasure, with the river acting both as a cleansing force and a silencer of memory. As the condemned vanished beneath the waves, they were socially erased, their names and deeds washed away with the current, leaving behind only the ripples that whispered tales of their warning. Performing this execution was an intricate ritual, creating a grand spectacle where the gravity of the crime demanded full public participation. The spectacle began long before the fatal plunge. As the accused awaited their fate, they experienced the bleak purgatory of imprisonment, a cold prelude to the harsh theatre of justice. As the ritual unfolded, officials, clerics, and executioners wove a macabre dance of order and condemnation, drawing the community into a collective affirmation of their shared values. The animals, vibrant participants in human retribution, added unpredictable energy to the ritual. The sack and snake punishment, while consistent in its core, occasionally adapted based on local customs and interpretations. Records hint at variations, where certain animals were absent due to logistical constraints or shifts in symbolic meaning. Still, every execution retained its central chaotic essence, capturing the menace of disorder and the fragility of societal bonds. Interpretations of this practice spanned a spectrum from necessary harshness to reflections on human nature's darker side. As Roman philosophers reflected on parricide, their musings offered a deeper understanding of this severe practice. Seneca, with his Stoic philosophy, likely saw the punishment's starkness as a teaching tool on morality and vice. Meanwhile, Cicero viewed the measure as essential in preserving the sanctity of family and the state's stability. These intellectuals debated the balance between necessary deterrence and ethical governance, their discussions framing the narrative of Roman law's potency. For many Romans, the threat of poena cullei stood as a formidable deterrent. The rich symbolism in this ritual extended a profound warning about the fragile sanctity of family bonds. Taxed or tangentially connected, this fear was an omnipresent deterrent, tying each Roman citizen to a collective understanding of justice, shared beliefs, and societal preservation. Such executions were dramatic affirmations of Roman ethics, where every act of justice reinforced cultural identity and communal resolve. Through the lens of history and critique, we examine Rome's complex legacy. Brutal, yet undeniably influential in shaping thoughts on justice. Despite philosophical discourses challenging their ethical dimensions, the lasting effects of Roman-style justice still echo across time. Its legacy colours the broader narrative on capital punishment, impacting future generations' perceptions of justice and societal order. The ancient tale of sack and snake stands as a monument to the human struggle with morality and law, a balance of vindictive extremes and its aspirations for order. As echoes whisper through time, they remain a haunting testament to the human condition, reminding us that the lessons of the past hold valuable insights for our ongoing quest for fairness and justice. In a peculiar blend of the symbolic and the macabre, the Romans crafted punishments that served as both retribution and narrative art. The poena cullei stands as one of the most vivid examples, a dire sentence reserved for the most heinous of acts, patricide, the killing of one's own father. To the Romans, such a crime disrupted not only familial bonds, but the very cosmic order. The punishment of being sewn into a sack with a dog, a rooster, a monkey and a snake was no mere execution. It was a story, each creature carrying its own metaphor, speaking to the horrendous nature of the crime. In ancient Roman life, the family was sacred, a microcosm where the paterfamilias, the father, reigned supreme like a domestic deity. To commit parricide was to shatter this sacrosanct structure. The poena cullei, therefore, embodied a complex web of meanings, reflecting the gravity of such an offence against state, family, and the universe itself. Each animal sewn into the sack wasn't just thrown in by happenstance. They were deliberate symbols carried through ritualistic storytelling, embedding the executed within a chaotic narrative of their own heinous deed. Among these animals was the monkey, a creature that often amused onlookers with its human-like antics, but was also seen as a mockery of humanity. Romans associated the monkey with moral perversion, and in the sack, it stood as a distorted mirror reflecting the criminal's descent into a base, animalistic state. The presence of the monkey mocked the perpetrator in those final moments, a powerful reminder of what they had become, a grotesque parody of human decency, stripped bare of societal order. The snake played its own insidious role, forever entwined in human myth as a symbol of betrayal and cunning. This deadly creature mirrored the treachery of parricide, silent, lethal, and ultimately destructive. Enclosed in the sack, the snake became a living metaphor for the deceit woven through the parricide's actions, with its very presence a testament to the lurking danger of betrayal. The tension of sharing those claustrophobic quarters with such a creature only heightened the execution's psychological dread, where fear coiled with every hiss. Meanwhile, the dog in Roman society served dual roles: loyal guardian and ominous scavenger. By placing the dog within the sack, the Romans masterfully inverted its customary role. This herald of familial loyalty was subverted into an arbiter of punishment, reinforcing the way this ultimate act of betrayal had shattered domestic harmony. The confined dog's frantic barking would resonate as an unsettling chorus during the criminal's final moments, a cacophony echoing the chaos they had sown in their own lives. The rooster, a creature heralding the dawn, carried a contrasting role within this grotesque ensemble. Traditionally, it symbolised the start of a new day, yet here, it signified a dawn tainted by disorder. Its crowing served as an involuntary soundtrack to the criminal's demise, a dual signal of chaotic beginnings and the guardian duties forsaken, shouting into the void that this new dawn would be haunted by destruction. The entire ordeal of the poena cullei was as much about psychological torment as it was about physical demise, a closing act intended to unravel the condemned psyche with its sensory overload and inescapable confrontation with guilt. The animals, each with its own symbolic horror, emulated a living nightmare, a relentless symphony of regret that left no room for peace or self-deceptive innocence in those final moments. Denying the criminal burial became the ultimate act of erasure. For Romans, to pass without burial was both scandalous and a curse, severing any hope of peace for the soul. Cast into a river, the sinner received no rest, no ritual acknowledgement, only oblivion. This denial added a stroke of profound insult that the living could see, and it echoed a scandalous consignment not just from society, but from historical memory itself, eternally banished beyond the realm of ancestral honour. These executions were not quiet affairs. They were social events comprising spectacle and instruction, reinforcing state power and societal norms in a vivid performance. The processional path to a watery grave became an open-air stage where societal values and taboos were unmistakably broadcast to the gathered populace. Such public theatre ensured the populace understood and internalised the severe consequences of violating the sacred codes woven into the societal fabric. Over time, the elements of the poena cullei evolved, reflecting shifts in Rome's political, cultural, and social consciousness. Changes in political structure and exposure to diverse cultures saw the ritual adjusted to maintain relevance, mirroring broader shifts in justice philosophy as Rome's empire expanded and adapted. Even with the fall of Rome, the haunting shadow of the poena cullei lingered, serving as a testament to the grim yet theatrical extremes to which a society would go to enforce moral and familial recollection. Today it invites us to ponder the lengths to which a civilization will go to uphold order, and the stories that punishments tell, stories that live on and echo through time, as a narrative of its values and fears. In the heart of ancient Rome, the very act of punishment was a performance, both a stern warning and a vivid spectacle. The Romans employed a tapestry of execution methods, each intricately linked to the crime, the social standing of the accused, and the societal message intended to ripple through the masses. For a society obsessed with order and law, justice was more than retribution. It was a choreographed exhibition designed to teach, even as it terrified. At times, fate unfolded at the edge of the notorious Tarpeian Rock, where traitors met their demise. This stark precipice, nestled on the Capitoline Hill, was a stage where the condemned were cast down to meet the jagged embrace of the rocks below. It was a grim, symbolic act, a fall that mirrored their betrayal of the state. Here, justice was not only served, but seen from every corner as a testament to Rome's zero tolerance for treason, juxtaposed against the sacred backdrop of Jupiter's temple. Sometimes, however, Rome preferred a more subdued, intimate form of execution. In the shadowy confines of prison cells, strangulation was executed in silence. This whispering termination, void of public fanfare, stripped the condemned of breath and existence with quiet certainty. These hushed deaths were as politically charged as their public counterparts, hidden but potent reminders of Rome's reach and the inescapable consequence of crossing its laws. For others, the path to perdition unfolded on the wooden beams of crucifixion. It was an ordeal of endurance and humiliation, designed to stretch the agony across endless sunlight hours. Reserved for slaves and rebels, this method painted the air with the cries of the suffering, as bodies were displayed as living warnings. Each nail driven home sealed the fate of the condemned, while sending shudders through even the thickest-skinned onlookers. This wasn't just death, it was a narrative of the condemned becoming a public testament. Rods too played their part in the lexicon of Roman punishment, delivering rhythmic, bone-jarring lessons. Beatings, whether preludes to more final penalties or stand-alone reprimands, offered a grim choreography where justice danced to the beat of wood on skin. Their simplicity belied their effectiveness. Each stroke left its mark, both physically and metaphorically, on the individuals and the crowd that bore witness to these public displays of dominance. In the Colosseum, executions transformed into theatre. Beasts were applauded as judge, jury, and executioner. Lions and leopards turned human folly into entertainment, drawing Roman crowds stirred by the gruesome allure of nature unleashed upon man. These events, cloaked as spectacles, delivered grim fables about betrayal and justice, under the roaring approval of society hungry for admonitory narratives. Some transgressions warranted an erasure beyond death. Crimes of a particularly abhorrent nature led to damnatio memoriae, erasing an individual from the very tapestry of history. An act not just of personal annihilation, but of symbolic eradication, stripping away legacy left behind and condemning them to oblivion. Ghosts erased from chronicles, neither spoken nor mourned, becoming wraiths lost to the corridors of memory. Remarkably, each method of punishment held its place within the Roman landscape, sites themselves loaded with significance. Whether the central forum or discrete provincial arenas, execution locales were more than venues. They were chosen with precision to project lessons into the weave of daily life, binding law with public conscience in a haunting, enduring echo. Even the tools of execution were symbolic, chosen meticulously for their layered meanings. From the executioner's garb to the object of death itself, each element was carefully crafted to convey a moral lesson. A cross was never just wood. It was a symbol of public degradation and shared sin. These choices transformed punishment into a narrative, rich with lessons carved into the public psyche. Today, echoes of these ancient practices whisper through our own systems of justice, casting threads back to those stark Roman traditions. Modern societies have refined their approaches, moving away from openly brutal spectacles, but the foundational shadows linger. Discussions on justice and morality still resonate with the haunting undertones of ancient punishments, challenging us to reflect on our own narratives of crime and penance. The story of Rome's executions remains a spectral reminder woven into the present, forcing us to face not just our history, but the very nature of justice itself. The Colosseum stood as a formidable testament to Roman engineering and ambition, a marvel of stone and spectacle where the boundary between life and death blurred. Under the Tuscan sun, thousands gathered, the air alive with anticipation, waiting for the brutal performances to unfold. In this grand amphitheatre, the universe seemed encapsulated with Rome at its heart, a place where emperors sat above the masses, observing as citizens, foreigners, and slaves filled the seats below, each represented in a hierarchy of power and spectacle. Inside, the arena thrummed with the roars of wild animals and the murmur of the crowd, a symphony of anticipation. The games displayed the empire's might, not in military might or wealth, but through meticulously crafted narratives of brutality. Executions became elaborate plays where criminals assumed roles from Rome's revered myths, their deaths mingling creativity with cruelty. Myth morphed into mortality as the audience became both spectators and players in a dance dictated by the emperor's whims. The Romans shunned bland punishment. Instead, they opted for drama, intertwining their myths with the fates of the condemned. Take Icarus, whose hubris-laden fall from the sky was reenacted on the sands of the Colosseum. Condemned men took on the persona of Icarus, their ascendancy and demise orchestrated to mimic myth. The crowd knew the tale well, yet each enactment wrapped them in suspense. The inevitable fall, a striking allegory, performed before their eyes. These weren't just deaths, they were stories elevated by Rome's grand stage, reminders carved in flesh of what it meant to defy the divine. Prometheus too found a grim parallel in the arena. Shackled and desolate, criminals played the titan who defied the gods. Instead of an eagle, lions meted out punishment, their claws a fierce proxy as the audience gasped at each reenacted savage ordeal. Here the story penetrated deeper than mere execution. It layered punishment with poetry, casting reminders of defiance's cost alongside the brutal artistry of fatal narratives. Orpheus, the mythical musician whose songs tamed both beast and heart, met a gruesome end not by sound, but by frenzy. His legend invoked a cruel twist. Men condemned as Orpheus faced the wild, not with notes and melody, but with naked fear. Where legends enthralled in harmony, the Colosseum bared chaos's sting, ironizing beauty and savagery, nature's unchecked ferocity against human artifice's tender reach. Even the festive chaos of Saturnalia, Rome's season of flipped roles and revelry, seeped into the Colosseum's bloodied sand. Here, chaos came to life as execution narratives inverted societal norms. Executioners donned victims' attire, criminals paraded as emperors, and strict societal layers dissolved into revelry. It was a fleeting reversal, a mirror held to the world stage, showing both power's fragility and the ironies of hierarchy in a few madcap hours. The emperor, always the director within the Colosseum, wielded ultimate power, his thumb the arbiter between mercy and death. His simple gesture mirrored divine justice, capturing the arena in a held breath as onlookers awaited his decree. More than spectacle, this theatre reinforced Imperial Rome's image, a nod or a thumb directing grand narratives of loyalty and defiance, binding the public's collective memory. Roman spectators did more than just watch. They actively shaped the games. The audience's roar could sway decisions, influencing life and death in real time. Their responses were not just reactionary, but essential to the game's cathartic release. The games became a blend of participation and propaganda, mirroring the public's needs and imperial ideals in a grand communal chorus. The executioners, often overlooked, stood as the artists behind the violence. Tasked with more than death, they crafted experiences steeped in narrative, their grim ballet a portrayal of myth with each stroke. Trained to perform executions that were both precise and poetic, they executed tales bound in both immediacy and legacy, inscribing lessons on sand with a macabre grace. The legacy of these theatrical executions transcends time, echoing today in our fascination with narrative justice. The Romans showed us that storytelling could shape societal reflection and dominance, blending reality with myth in a dance with the divine. Modern entertainment, entwined with themes of downfall and redemption, echoes this tradition, drawing from an ancient stage to tell timeless tales. Thus the Colosseum, a place once filled with gods and monsters, whispers across the ages, reminding us that history and myth are always closer than we think, forever woven into our storytelling tapestry. In the grand tapestry of Roman executions, decapitation loomed as a strangely respectful rite, reserved for those of certain societal prestige, mainly Roman citizens of standing. Offered as a merciful alternative amidst a range of brutal ends, this form was a nod to Rome's societal hierarchies and sense of order. It was swift, over in a heartbeat with a sharp glint of an axe or a soldier's sword, preserving a slice of dignity even as life slipped away. For Rome, this method reflected a deeper respect for status, ensuring the final act remained one of quiet efficiency rather than protracted torment. The axe fell, and with it came a curious mixture of finality and homage. Decapitation wasn't just about ending a life, it symbolised a harsh detachment from one's identity, a severance from community where the head held both knowledge and persona. This practice underlined the societal chasm between classes, enforcing the idea that one's method of departure was closely tied to their social fabric. Gathered in places like the Campus Martius, amid solemn rituals, spectators witnessed what could be likened to a civic duty wrapped in grim pageantry. Far from the uproarious clamour of the Colosseum, these moments were subdued statements of law and order, an acknowledgement of one's place, even in decline. Within the tangled web of Rome's social hierarchy, decapitation carried a certain cachet. It was a grim homage to status granted to those whose lives, marred though they may be by crime, were marked by wealth or noble connection. Here was a curious paradox. Even as punishment loomed, the echoes of privilege remained, shaping the experience of death itself. More than flesh was on trial. It was the stature they carried, a reputation that clung like a shadow, even as the axe descended. The practice revealed not only what society thought of justice, but also what it believed about distinction and value. The wealth and status of the condemned played into how their story ended, and sometimes how it was remembered. An influential citizen might find strings pulled in favour of a cleaner, more precise execution, keeping away the messiness more commonly associated with theatre of blood. Money often shuffled behind the scenes, like a silent member of the proceedings, invisibly ensuring decency in decline. And posthumously, This financial clout could wheel and deal the fate of one's estate. Families swirling in manoeuvres to protect assets, impose burial rites, all testifying to the legacy of influence and wealth. The proceedings themselves were choreographed with all the precision of a grim dance. Condemned individuals, resigned to fate yet acutely aware of its formality, were led by a measured procession. The site selected for these executions was both sombre and strategic, distant enough to avoid the clamour of the populace, yet never too far from prying eyes eager for spectacle. Executioners, precise and dispassionate, wielded well-maintained blades, ensuring the act was as clean as it was inevitable. Unlike other gruesome events, this didn't entertain but enforced a collective moment of sombre respect. A pause in life before civic duty resumed its relentless churn. Heads severed from shoulders did not always disappear quietly. In some cases, especially with crimes tinged by political scandal, these heads became emblems of control, displayed openly as warnings to those who might dare disturb the peace. Pinned high upon the rostra or paraded within the forum, they spoke of the ultimate penalty for disobedience. Such displays lingered in the public mind, grounding Rome's grip on its people in the visceral language of life and death. Heads became narrative devices, a grim reminder of the thin line between power and punishment. The stark act of decapitation rippled beyond its immediate consequence. It was a spectacle drawing public eyes to the fabric of inequality and privilege, underscoring Rome's persistent societal divides. The dichotomy was raw. The Roman citizen's merciful end starkly contrasted with the ghastly fates met by plebeians and slaves. Such acts crystallized the extant class hierarchies, weaving into a broader tale of identity and worth within the looming shadow of imperial Rome. For philosophers, the starkness of decapitation was a fertile ground for reflection. Amid legal recourse and societal rituals, figures like Seneca pondered the blur of justice and humanity. How swift execution, though deemed compassionate, was tangled with questions of ethics and power. For some, it wasn't just an end, but a point of departure into deeper musings on morality, law, and the transient nature of influence. The fall of the blade invited contemplation on life's impermanence and how, in mortality's shadow, law and society entwined within a dance of judgment and mercy. Even in art, the tale of decapitation moved beyond the grotesque, a symbol perpetuated through mosaics or stories, echoing Rome's message and legacy. Images captured not the gore, but the solemnity of justice, the whispered power of a single strike. Narrative and memory wove these moments into a broader historical tapestry, transporting them across generations and effectively reminding the world of Rome's complex tableau of power, identity, and retribution. Through these cultural memories, decapitation held enduring significance, encapsulating an era, its values, and its unyielding hold on the human conscience. Crucifixion, though often associated with the Romans, was not born from their imagination. The practice's origins trace back to ancient Persia, where it served as a grim cautionary tale for potential dissidents. The Greeks occasionally embraced it, but Rome transformed it into a distinct symbol of imperial might and fear. They borrowed this agonizing form of execution, adapting it as a tool of social control, an unforgiving reminder of Rome's dominion. As bodies writhed atop crosses, they embodied Rome's draconian justice, painted against a backdrop of sun-drenched squares. This tableau of human agony warned all who dared defy the Roman Empire. The journey to the cross began long before nails pierced flesh. Victims, often rebels, slaves, or the destitute, first endured the relentless flogging, a prelude of pain designed to weaken both body and spirit. The flagrum, a whip with shards of bone or lead sewn into its thongs, tore skin and muscle, setting the stage for death. Those who survived were stripped bare, robbed of dignity, and loaded with their patibulum. Forced to stumble through jeering crowds, these condemned souls were living proclamations of Rome's power. Their march to crucifixion sites positioned at city fringes was as much a part of the punishment as the execution itself. Once at the place of execution, mechanics took over, the grim choreography of death. Bound in ropes or driven through with nails that parted flesh to find purchase in bone, victims were mounted on upright posts. Stripped cruelly by design, their agony was magnified by every onlooker's gaze. Gravity pulled relentlessly at their bodies, each joint a screaming testament to inventive cruelty. The burden of the cross hung as heavy on bystanders' minds as on victims' shoulders, etching the vivid imagery of suffering into Rome's everyday life. What marked crucifixion as particularly insidious was its slow, suffocating death dance. The very will to live prolonged suffering. Nailed wrists and bound feet offered meagre support to lift suffering bodies for breath. Over time, strangled gasps gave way to ominous silence as lungs failed, a descent into acidosis claiming its due. Death could be a full day's affair or last longer, attentive only to the vagaries of physical resilience and not the mercy of man. For those made witness, the morbid show became a memory etched in time, and even in defeat, the spectacle continued. Corpses dangled as relics of revenge, or the process of removal erected yet another stage of humiliation. The crowded theatre of the mind was not forgotten in the physical tableau of agony. Crucifixion swayed both audiences and emperors into fear's embrace, a full-bodied demonstration of Rome's reach. With each execution, the empire cast forth a ripple of terror, reminding every citizen of its terrifying resolve. Times of unrest often saw crucifixion surge, a calculated move by authorities to spare no method in maintaining order. Festivals and market days became stages for this grim ballet of control, where real lessons in obedience and consequence unfolded before lived imagination. Yet Rome's creativity in death extended beyond the cross's traditional form. Variations were crafted, shaped as much by necessity as by artistic cruelty. Wooden X or T-shapes, tree lines transformed into stakes for mass deaths. This was a theatre of malleable brutality. Some faced their crosses inverted or crooked, contradicting traditional positions to send messages interwoven with dark symbolism. To Romans, crucifixion was less about the tool and more about the message of supremacy it conveyed. It stood not just as an execution method, but as the embodiment of Rome's infinite expressions of might. Religion and spirituality brushed the broad strokes of crucifixion, casting shadows that lingered well beyond the immediate. Though viewed as a bodily despoilment in pagan Rome, execution upon a cross resonated deeply with societies entwined in belief. To Judaism, such a fate rendered one accursed. But as Christianity ascended, crucifixion's narrative pivoted from a story of damnation to one of light and redemption. Rome inadvertently shaped a symbol whose echoes would reverberate across millennia, a stark stamp on history's blank slate. Even after Rome's fall, the legacy of crucifixion persisted, casting long shadows through time's corridor. Its imagery seeded deep within the collective consciousness, planted by painters and writers, transcending the mere boundaries of historical recount. This acknowledgement of Rome's cruelty, wrapped in an artistry that captured and held both fascination and horror. Other rising powers co-opted the practice, bending the cruelty to their contexts, reshaping its legacy across lands and societies tethered to violence's spectre. Roman crucifixion, a canvas painted in blood and bone, offers a study of humanity's darkest impulses, harnessed beneath civilization's veneer. Its history demands examination, bereft of mockery, but with depth. A testament to the duality of a realm refined in savagery's shadow. From those ancient beams, heart-rending lessons hang, urging reflection and understanding from the past's blood-stained theatre, capturing not just the legacy of ruthlessness, but the greater pondering of what it means to govern and to be governed. Fire, that ancient elemental force, was as intertwined with Roman justice as it was with Roman life. It had the power to build, illuminate, and warm, but also to punish, destroy, and purify. For Rome, fire was a tool to eliminate not just the body of the criminal, but the very taint of their soul. When traitors or arsonists met their fiery fate, the flames weren't just snuffing out lives, they were purifying Rome itself, a divine judgment meant to cleanse the very essence of the city. The sheer spectacle of it was meant to sear a lesson into the minds of the audience. The smoke hovered like a ghost over those who watched, reminding each citizen that in Rome, fire was both deterrent and spectacle. Imagine the suffocating closeness of Rome's cramped wooden quarters, where one lit match could consume whole neighbourhoods. In such a city, arson was an unforgivable sin, a potential catastrophe waiting to unfold. Rome didn't just punish arsonists, it made a blazing display of their extinguishment to dramatise the threat they posed. By casting these criminals into the flames, Rome metaphorically attempted to maintain the fragile order of its densely packed streets, reminding citizens that fire was a threat within and without. For those who betrayed Rome, the punishment was similarly combustive. Treachery was a profound rupture, a renegade act that threatened the very foundation of the empire. These traitors, enveloped by roaring flames, faced an end that sought to erase their treachery and their existence. The Inferno served as a mythic punishment, reminiscent of Prometheus, whose defiance was eternally punished by the gods. As the flames danced upon their flesh, traitors were reminded of the sacredness of loyalty, a concept so dear to Rome that it protected its sanctity with fire. This macabre theatre of punishment was not mere brutality, it was a ritual, binding the community in shared experience. The fires were carefully lit in public squares, the same places where Romans gathered for celebrations and proclamations. As the condemned faced their fiery fate, the crowd assembled, a vibrant and tense assembly, eager to witness Rome's justice. Murmurs of anticipation mixed with the crackle of flames, and the message was clear. Defy societal norms, and you too could face the cleansing fire. As the heat cast flickering shadows, people were reminded of life's precarious covenant with legal and societal order. Among the most terrifying spectacles of this fiery justice were the human torches. Martyrs to their own missteps, the condemned were wrapped in pitch-coated tunics and set ablaze, not just as execution, but as a stark emblem of state power. The flames glowed eerily against the night sky, turning the guilty into unwilling beacons of warning. For spectators, the unsettling transformation of fellow humans into living torches etched itself indelibly into the psyche, a fiery lesson about the perilous edge of the law's reach. In a society rich with bizarre and harsh punitive measures, being boiled in oil, was reserved for those crimes that seethed with public outrage. The boiling cauldron became a theatre of horror, flesh surrendering to the blistering liquid, each scream hanging in the air like a ghostly chorus. This punishment was both immediate and unforgettable, reinforcing that Rome would not tolerate any who dared violate its moral code. Romans had long associated fire with purification, believing that the flames cleansed the societal soul as they consumed the criminal's body. These fiery punishments were not random acts of cruelty, but carefully thought out rituals to remind everyone that sin and transgression had real, painful consequences. Standing amidst the crackling pyres and scalding cauldrons, citizens saw their world through a different lens, a world where chaos was reduced and morality was enforced by transformative flames. Despite the gruesome nature of these events, they were not universally accepted. Philosophers and intellectuals debated their morality and purpose. Were they necessary deterrents or merely barbaric spectacles? This dichotomy reflected the wider societal conversation around justice and humanity, a conversation woven into the fabric of Rome's collective consciousness. Yet, public executions continued, seen by many as vital in maintaining the empire's social order, branding the memory of the fire as both a lesson and an indelible mark on Rome's soul. Even as these practices faded, the fiery nature of Roman justice left its mark on the pages of history. Fire's use in execution became a symbol, influencing how subsequent cultures viewed law and morality. The flames of Rome, though long extinguished, still flicker in tales of justice and punishment, echoing through time. They compel us to question, what price should be paid for order? Is fire truly a purifier of sin, or merely a veil of smoke shrouding its own darkness? As we peer back through the smoky veil of history, Rome's use of fire as justice invites us to wrestle with our own definitions of law and morality, urging us to ponder their timeless dance across the human story. In ancient Rome, the grim spectacle of damnatio ad bestias, or condemnation to beasts, unfolded with a primal ferocity that both thrilled and terrified its audience. This form of punishment arose from Rome's intricate dance between spectacle and retribution, designed not just as a death sentence, but as a public lesson, a stark warning wrapped in the chaos of the arena. Picture the scene. Condemned criminals, often stripped of their clothing and humanity, were thrust into the sand-strewn Colosseum, vulnerable before the hungry gaze of thousands. These unfortunate souls, including prisoners of war and those who dared defy Roman order, faced not just their own mortality, but the brutal judgment of the empire itself, symbolised through a battle against the wild. Within this theatre of death, symbolism reigned supreme. The beasts, lions, leopards, bears, each represented untamed chaos, a mirror reflecting the raw, unchecked forces of nature that Rome itself sought to conquer and control. For the spectators, this gruesome survival contest was more than mere punishment. It was an allegory for human struggle against the elements, a visual rhetoric that posed the empire as the civilizing force preserving society from anarchy. Rome's conceptual framework was such that in order to maintain their place in the world, they had to continuously affirm their dominance over nature and its unpredictable beasts. Thus, for those in the stands, the violent spectacle reinforced the stark boundaries between order and chaos, civilization and savagery. Yet the execution methods were far from uniform, adding a layer of unpredictability to the morbid dance of man against beast. While lions, with their majestic ferocity, were common, a menagerie of horrors awaited the condemned. Leopards, bears, and wild boars were all summoned to play their part in the Empire's grim theatre. The variety only heightened the drama, showcasing Rome's far-reaching dominion as animals were transported from distant lands specifically for such bloody affairs. Occasionally prisoners were shackled as sacrificial offerings, adding a thin veneer of ritualistic solemnity to proceedings. At times, the doomed were armed with little more than wooden staves, a mockery of the concept of fair battle. Meanwhile, other scenarios forced pairs of condemned individuals to enact myth-inspired combat, their colourful costumes a bizarre contrast to the grim fate awaiting them. Amidst the blood and dust, the psychological impact on the audience was unmistakable. The Colosseum, like a grand cathedral of the macabre, resonated with collective gasps and cheers, uniting Roman citizens in shared horror and excitement. Senators down to plebeians gathered in an arena of moral ambiguity where the spectacle both entertained and conditioned its viewers to accept brutality as a necessity. A divine order validating the sharp edges of their social hierarchy. In their seats, the citizens felt the weight of the spectacle's implications, reconciling personal discomfort with the compelling allure of justice enacted before their eyes. This wasn't merely an exercise in entertainment, though, for lurking beneath the blood-stained surface were complex political currents. The damnatio ad bestias was also a power statement by the ruling class, who used these spectacles to affirm their imperial authority and to distract from political unrest or dissent. Carefully timed with public festivals or celebrations of military victories, these events pacified the populace while projecting imperial might. Statesmen, ever eager to associate themselves with Rome's strength, used these occasions to cement social contracts with the citizenry. Seneca might have condemned such violence in pursuit of public appeasement, but for many politicians, the spectacle was a potent symbol of their control. Guided into the arena alongside the condemned were the gladiators, figures of both admiration and pathos. These warriors occasionally played pivotal roles in concluding the grim proceedings, their lethal skills bringing fatal closure to those who improbably survived their bestial opponents. Such was Rome's grim dance, that even the trainers, those who shaped creatures into formidable executors, held sway, tempering ferocity with discipline, turning nature's chaos into a tool of state power. These men wielded their influence unseen, adding layers of complexity to the stark brutality of the games. Within the annals of history, documented tales and survivor accounts, though sparse, provide windows into this macabre world. Some narratives tell of Christians and slaves, their final moments in the arena immortalised by chroniclers like Tacitus, who framed their sacrifices as testimony to Rome's insatiable thirst for control and punishment. Yet, within the brutality, stories of valour and divine rescue surface, where the condemned were paradoxically spared death's embrace, either by a merciful crowd or the curious indifference of their animal executioners. As the centuries turned, however, the thundering cadence of the damnatio ad bestias began to wane. Changes in public taste, the rise of Christianity, with its ethical challenge to blood sports, and shifting economic and logistical challenges, stilled the roar of lions in Rome's fading light. The legacy of such spectacles, though, lingered on, echoing through the ages as a reminder of the complex interplay between justice, spectacle, and power. Even as humanity edged away from this cruel art form, its indelible mark on history remains, a shadowy testament to the lengths Rome would traverse to maintain its precarious grasp on order and control. In the heart of ancient Rome, the sting of punishment could pierce deeper than the flesh. It could reach into the very essence of a person, seeking not just to punish, but to obliterate. This was the relentless fate of damnatio memoriae, a chilling decree aimed at wiping a person from the annals of history. To have your name chiselled off stone, your statues toppled, and mentions of you erased from books. This was Rome's way of ensuring that your memory felt like nothing more than dust in the wind, a ghostly whisper silenced before it ever had a chance to echo. Reserved for those whose crimes shattered the delicate web of trust within the state, this form of punishment was exacted sparingly, requiring a meticulous consensus among Rome's power holders. It wasn't an easy task nor a decision made frivolously, for the stain of treachery had to be eradicated thoroughly and publicly. A grand monument would suddenly find itself nameless, or a once revered statue would stand faceless, scarred by hammers that removed identity without damaging the surrounding history. Yet in attempting to erase, Rome paradoxically cemented an individual's shadowy legacy, their absence sometimes speaking louder than their presence ever could. For families whose kin had been condemned, the punishment rained down like a relentless storm. With the accused stripped of existence, their families' fortunes and social standings teetered on the brink of disaster. Property confiscated and social ostracism were their new reality, transforming households into symbols of shame. The impact rippled through generations as lost wealth and exclusion became inheritance. Some families, artisans of resilience, would maneuver through these murky waters with cleverness, perhaps even preserving their lineage by passing whispered tales in coded language, shrouding legacies that the state intended to extinguish. In a city obsessed with remembrance, damnatio memoriae stood as a stark contradiction, an official mandate to forget. Citizens participated in this enforced forgetting, complicit in their silence, avoiding the name of the erased like a curse. Yet people are as unpredictable as the narratives they craft, and sometimes, rather than wilting under this imposed amnesia, the condemned were remembered as martyrs in secret circles. While official history forgot them, clandestine gatherings ensured their stories lived on, because the human spirit finds ways to resurrect in unexpected places. The effectiveness of memory erasure often hinged on the individual's initial impact. Those with significant influence proved trickier ghosts to vanquish, their stories lingering like an unsolved mystery, refusing to be buried. History is stubborn, and gaps left by damnatio memoriae became irresistible mysteries for future generations. The deliberate voids often attracted more attention, making the erased feel present in their absence. Not all efforts achieved their intended silence. When influential allies became unintended targets of Rome's memory purge, political structures bore the brunt, with sentiments smouldering like embers ready to ignite dissent. Yet Rome wasn't unique in its pursuit of memory suppression. Across civilizations, similar footsteps can be traced. Pharaohs chiselling out rival names, works of art shredded or rewritten under regimes fearing ideas. These acts form a tapestry that links diverse cultures through a shared desire for control. Rome did it with a certain flair and scope that remains compelling. The irony? Attempts to control memory often transform it, making the lost voices even louder than before, turning history into a gripping dance between light and shadow. And so the stakes were high. Damnatio memoriae didn't just reshape the lives of the condemned, it shaped the very fabric of Roman society, creating a tension between narrative control and the inevitable persistence of memory. It reflected a complex relationship with the past, where the ideal of a controlled narrative clashed with the raw, untamable essence of human remembrance. This ancient dictum holds echo still heard today as we wrestle with the politics of memory, historical narrative, and the ethics of forgetting. It's a somber reminder from an empire that obliterated and immortalized its outcasts in one fell swoop, whispering to us about the power of memory. The stories chosen, the stories hidden, and the stories that find a way to be told despite all efforts to silence them. The lesson remains vivid. In the grand tapestry of history, even erasers leave a mark. In the bustling heart of ancient Rome, where the scent of baked bread mixed with the harsher smell of life in a crowded city, justice was more than an abstract concept. It was a living, breathing ritual, echoing through the streets like a relentless drumbeat. To keep the sprawling empire in check, Rome employed public executions not just as a form of retribution, but as grand performances, reinforcing both civic duty and fear. These acts were as much about binding society together in shared values as they were about the brutal enforcement of law. For the Romans, the harsh public display of punishment served a dual purpose: maintaining order and deterring future crimes, a stark reminder of the consequences of stepping out of line in an empire teetering on chaos. The spectacle of these executions was more than mere punishment. They embodied a cultural performance that underscored the very fabric of Roman society. Each death was a pageant played out to affirm collective identity, where the suffering of one underscored the rights and responsibilities of all. The condemned, in their final moments, played roles in a theatrical assertion of power and control. Rome's belief in retribution and prevention painted the public execution not just as a necessity, but as a moral and communal purification, where the chaotic was purged to restore order. Yet not all viewed these macabre spectacles through the same lens. Philosophers like Seneca offered biting critiques, referring to them as savage games that revealed mankind's capacity for cruelty and desensitization. To Seneca, such displays did less to protect society than to debase it, questioning whether the thirst for blood overshadowed the pursuit of justice. While he cast a light on moral degradation, Cicero, known for his oratorical prowess, defended these spectacles as necessary evils. He contended that fear, not festivity, was what kept Rome's citizens loyal and law-abiding. The debates between these two figures highlight the internal conflicts of Rome concerning justice as both deterrence and savagery, echoing issues that persist today. In the divine multiplex of Roman society, religion sanctioned these grisly acts. The executions were ceremonies woven with ritualistic elements, purporting to cleanse the populace of sin and maintain cosmic balance. Each death was an offering to appease the gods, binding the living to a shared understanding that divine favour, and thus survival, depended on the elimination of those who offended both civic and sacred laws. These events, however drenched in ceremony and consequence, also satisfied a human appetite for drama. Crowds gathered not only from compulsion, but from the allure of shared experience and spectacle. The throng, dense with anticipation, provided a psychological theatre where fear and thrill mingled, offering a fleeting escape from ordinary existence. Execution days turned into vast communal gatherings, defying social divides with the glue of shared, albeit grim, spectacle. Here in the charged air of amphitheatres, Roman society collectively confronted and participated in the raw exercise of state authority, walking a fine line between duty and entertainment. Through these spectacles, Rome projected not just the power of its laws, but its omnipresence as a state. Execution was both statecraft and storytelling, each death narrating the story of dominance, each displayed body a sentence in the paragraph of power. This carefully curated image served as an instrument of propaganda, ingraining the empire's reach and retribution into the public consciousness. Executions were often threaded into the fabric of public festivals, amplifying their visibility and ensuring the ripples of state justice were felt far and wide. As centuries passed, a shift emerged. Echoes of transformation fostered by expanding borders and the rise of Christianity, with its doctrine of forgiveness. The harsh spectacles gradually gave way to more reserved executions, reflecting new philosophies that favoured mercy over magnificence. As Roman law matured, so too did its punitive practices, adapting to the evolving ethos of a society no longer content with such brutal exhibitions of power. Pragmatism also played its role. Simpler methods proved more cost-effective and efficient. Today, the shadow of Rome's justice system still lingers, whispering through modern dialogues on capital punishment and deterrence. The spectacle remains a powerful, albeit controversial, tool in shaping society's behaviour toward crime and punishment. These ancient practices urge us to reflect on the morality of using fear and public scrutiny as instruments of law and the enduring challenge of balancing justice with humanity. In closing, Rome's brutal legacy offers a cautionary tale about the administration of justice as both spectacle and instrument of state power. It teaches us to scrutinise our own practices, challenging us to move toward a justice system that values dignity, equity, and humanity over the allure of fear. As we ponder these lessons and how they inform our society today, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you won't miss future explorations into the shadows of our collective past.